So one of the things I wanted to do for a long time was to create some kind of leveling system for lumber stacking. Up to this point, I've just been kind of using shims to get the base nice and level and flat. And just like in many things in life, starting with a good flat foundation is going to be really beneficial to drawing lumber. So what I'd really like to do is have some kind of base that I can lay down on the ground or on some blocks if I'm doing something outside, and be able to level all of those sticker columns to be all in the same plane, give me a nice flat base, which should yield flatter lumber. So I went through my offcuts and went through a few ideas, and I came with this. A base piece of C-channel. This will sit down on whatever I have, either on a concrete or on some concrete blocks or something, and that'll be the base plate. The wide base here will give me a lot of contact surface with whatever thing is sitting on, and the wings will give it a little bit of stability. So inside the C-channel, I'm going to weld a bolt so I can put a nut on it, and then on the top side I'll have some tube, and the tube will actually hold the lumber. The lumber will sit on top of here, and the bolt will allow me to adjust all of the tubes in the whole stack so that they're all in the same plane, give me a nice flat foundation for my lumber stacks. So I went out and got some actual stock for this. For the square tube, I went with 1.5 inch square by 11 gauge wall thickness, which should be plenty for this project. And for the C-channel, that's just a 3-inch piece of C-channel that has a weight of, I think, 4 pounds per foot. So I'll start breaking that stuff down and getting these things made. So now I want to decide on the spacing of the leveling bolts in the channel here, so I know where to drill the holes in the tube to receive those leveling bolts. And I'm kind of, well, at least I was kind of thinking like maybe 5, but as I'm looking at it now, that's going to be probably way more than is necessary. So the whole stack will probably weigh, on these 6 levelers, probably weigh around like 4,000 or 5,000 pounds. So each of these levelers is going to have less than 1,000 pounds on it. So that means that each of these spans, if I have these 3 sections here, each of these spans is going to have maybe 250 to 300 pounds in between each of these spans. And the loading is even for the most part. So that much load is not going to cause this tube to deflect at this length. So I think 4 is going to be plenty good for this, which means, you know, 1 less hole I have to drill in the tube. So I'm going to lay these out onto the tubes and then get to doing some drilling. We all know how much I love drilling holes in steel. All right, let me get these all lined up and I'll mark them all at the same time. So I'm going to lay everything out starting from one end, and I have them all flushed up on this end. I wasn't too precise with the length, so they're all different lengths, but it's not that big of a deal as long as I make it all based off of one side. So I have one at 3, and then 13.5. Away from that is going to be 16.5. Another 13.5 past that here. All right, let's see how this looks. That's cool. That's, I can take these outside and weld these bolts into the C-channel. So what I'll do is tack that first bolt in place, and I'm going to try and get the other ones as centered as I can in the holes in the tube. There. I'm just going to travel them back and forth so I can feel the extents of the holes, and then I'll go about halfway between them. That way that the bolt doesn't get caught up in the side of the hole as being adjusted. There you go. And that one is ready to be welded, so I can set that aside. I'm just going to go ahead and set them all up like this for now, and then I'll weld them all at once. Those are all done. I can go around and actually weld them all in now. So the ones I'm making now I'm going to be using on my indoor stack, so I'm not too worried about painting them, but I am going to degrease them because if you ever used this raw steel before, it is extremely dirty. So the 4-foot levelers that I made here were sort of a proof of concept. I wanted to try those out for my indoor stack. Now I've been drying lumber in this area of my basement for several years now, and previously I had ensured flatness over a 8-foot span, but this time I wanted to expand the area to do 10 feet. So I figured instead of going through the whole process of checking the whole area for flat over that 10 feet, I would just try out my levelers and see how well they would work in here. And they worked amazingly. But what I really had in mind for these levelers was for my outdoor stacks. So using these levelers, I was able to get a flat base for my slab stack in under 5 minutes, which is very nice. I used the string method, which I detailed when I built my sawmill. I built the bed, making sure the bed frame was totally flat. But essentially you run a string from corner to corner on the outside members, and when you adjust those outside members till the string meets in the center, you know those two outside members are in the same plane and they're parallel, and you have a flat surface there. Now you can also use a level at that point to make sure that the base is level as well. I just level them by eye. I'm not too worried about my stack being perfectly level. I'm really just more worried about it being as flat as possible. Now once those two outside ones are ready to go, you can run a string from end to end, and then you can bring up these center levelers to meet the string. I'll bring up the nuts on the outside to raise the two ends of each leveler to touch the string, and then when I have those in position, I can move the center nut up to meet the tube. Now when stacking logs outside, I've tried to maximize the space as much as possible, so that means that because the logs are always going to be different lengths and different widths, the bases are always going to be in different positions. So being able to move these things around really easily and set them up where they need to be is kind of essential. And previously I'd just been doing that with concrete block, leveling the blocks out with some dirt, and hopefully they stayed true. But that process was always kind of a pain to get through. So out here I made some shorter ones. These are 30 inches wide, and that's wide enough to span the width of 2 concrete blocks side by side. Now for this stack, I've used 5 of these levelers over a 10-foot length, and by the time I get the rest of the slabs up here, this stack is going to weigh maybe close to 8,000 pounds. So each of these individual levelers is going to have between maybe 1,200 to 1,500 pounds on them, depending on where in the log they are. So these things are really easy to make, and if you want to make your own, I'll have some drawings over on my website. There'll be a link to that down in the description, just so you can get the spacing the same as I did if you're interested in that. Otherwise, it's a very, very simple yet very effective tool to have in your lumber drying arsenal. So thank you as always for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments on the levelers, lumber, anything back in the shop or whatever, please feel free to leave me a comment. As always, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And until next time, happy woodworking.